Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Footy Travellers Podcast.
Mike, we are back on the mics together for the first time since our last trip, which is, I guess, coming up on a few weeks now.
True. It's been a minute since we've been on these mics together, although we've been on a few planes and in some stadiums together since then.
Indeed. Also true. And I think we should talk about our time traveling together for both the Copa América and the Euro 2024 tournaments on what we were billing as the Footy Travellers Intercontinental Summer Tour. So what do you think about, maybe a quick little recap of the actual itinerary we had between June 22nd and our eventual final match on July 9th? Maybe it wasn't the final match of the two tournaments, but, funny enough, we already have an episode out now about one of those games, one of those finals, that is, or at least the chaos ahead of it. So real quick, listeners, be sure to check out our previous episode on the mayhem ahead of the Copa América final from the perspective of four incredible fellow footy travelers. But yeah, speaking of incredible, Mike, shall we recap our incredible summer tour and I'll call it wild itinerary to kind of set the context of everything else that we're going to talk about in today's discussion?
Yeah, I think the itinerary sounds like a very logical place to start. Do you want to kick it off since you were the one representing us at our first official match of the tour back in June?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. So if we're talking then summer tour stops for official tournament matches, we have to start with Houston, Texas, June 22nd for the Copa América match between Mexico and Jamaica at NRG Stadium. A 1-0 win for Mexico. Congrats, I guess. Which actually, by the way, do you say energy or NRG when you mention that stadium?
As a frequent Houston visitor for the energy sector, I've never heard anyone pronounce it energy. I mean, I say energy a lot,
okay,
but they don't refer to the stadium in which you are referencing as energy, but rather they use the three letters very articulated, NRG.
Right.
But it's a fair question. And if you want to pronounce it however you want to pronounce it, I support you, bud.
No. I mean, I also say NRG. I've heard other people say energy, and not being a Houston local or frequent visitor.
Was it an accent, maybe? Maybe it was just an accent.
Maybe a Brit said it or something. I don't know. All right. We've clarified that. Anyway, from there, Houston, NRG Stadium. The next day was June 23rd. I went off to Dallas, Texas for another Copa match, USA versus Bolivia at AT&T Stadium.
That one, I believe, is pronounced Jerry World.
Oh, yeah. Touche. That was the first two stops, both in Texas. And then Mike, Monday, June 24th, the next day, as I was traveling from Texas to Germany, you actually were already there in Germany for our first Euro game. So
yeah. So Monday, June 24th, I pulled into Leipzig after a very late night in Frankfurt, partying with the Swiss, and then listening to the U.S. men's national team's match at 2 a.m. local time, which was also a fun little treat. This was our first in-stadium Euro match between Italy and Croatia that I was attending, which was a roller coaster of emotions as an Italian-American enjoying the late injury time heroics of Matteo Zaccagni to advance the Azzurri to the knockout rounds. But also as a lover of the sport and sadly witnessing most likely Luka Modric's last major tournament appearance, which was a bit of a bummer. So anyway, then comes the next morning, very few hours of sleep next morning, June 25th, when you land in Frankfurt and we both take trains to Dortmund to meet up for our first match together, which was France versus Poland at the infamous Signal Iduna Park, aka BVB Stadion
Mm-hmm.
during UEFA competitions, that is.
Yeah, they changed the name.
Or also, yeah, because, that's corporate.
Corporate stuff.
Or as I think the more traditional folks will call it, Westfalenstadion.
Yeah, that's true. I did see that as well on the wiki.
And at the train station stop, I believe that's what it's referred to.
Also true. A little bit of a travel nugget there, maybe, perhaps. And so if neither of us had traveled hectically already, the next day, on June 26th, we trained it again, this time together, down from Dortmund to Stuttgart, where we met with the OG FFT, Scott Wiley.
What up, Scotty?
We caught ourselves the scoreless draw between Belgium and Ukraine at VfB Stuttgart's MHP Arena, aka Neckarstadion. Apparently, Belgium fans
that really improved. That really improved from the last time we talked about German stadiums and pronunciations. I think
pronunciation improved.
Yeah.
You spend a little time in Germany, it rubs off. That
maybe for you, not for me.
No, we'll see later. Scoreless snoozer. Apparently, the Belgium fans didn't like that result either, as they booed their team at the final whistle.
Nor did Kevin De Bruyne like their response, it seems.
No, yeah, that's right. He did not. I think he wound up just marching the team away, right?
Just sending them to the locker room.
Yeah.
Those poor Red Devils just had another poor tourney.
Right. Well, captain's got to do what a captain's got to do, I guess.
Right.
Anyway, bit of a bad look on both sides, fan side, team side, in my opinion. But we're still not done with our crazy summer tour. So
next, after I had done 3 games in 3 days in 3 different cities, and together we had gone and done 5 games in 5 days in 5 different cities and 2 different continents.
Yeah.
We finally took a beat. We took a little break.
Finally. We earned it, I'd say.
We did.
Yeah,
we did.
It was definitely time for a little pause at that point. Although we obviously continue to enjoy some footy out of grounds on TVs. We threw in some very welcome travel and tourism. So landing in Stuttgart, thanks to the graciousness and hospitality of Scott, previously mentioned, we were able to spend a couple days after our match day there, just, recovering, reloading, checking out sites like the Mercedes-Benz Museum, catching up with other friends that we hadn't seen in years. Shout out to our homie Francis. And if we're AKAing stadiums, we'll AKA our homie Francis and say, what up, fresh? But then we hit Munich for a night to watch Germany's round of 16 game at one of the city's famed beer gardens. And to be fair, we also went to see Italy's game against Switzerland for our resident Azzurri stan over here.
That I don't know if that was much of a game, but I will say, in short summary, Munich was lovely. The beer gardens were lively, and the German victory party was legendary.
Yeah. And then from Munich, Mike, keep going with the itinerary here.
So from Munich, we flew to the picturesque land of Portugal and its sun-drenched Algarve region to kick back, relax, and enjoy some summer coastal living.
We have always talked about stopping in a country, still playing in knockout stages on our way home. Finally, we did it. We had talked about Spain or Portugal ahead of the trip. We ultimately, obviously, decided on Portugal. Thankfully, they advanced. And then it was time to return after Portugal stateside for some more Copa America. The madness is not over, folks.
So from the Algarve, I, myself, headed north to Porto for some pastel de nata and some francesinha. Look it up. It's awesome. And port wine. Then eventually resting in the beautiful Azores. While Colin, you headed to Lisbon. And from there, we both returned stateside, but you went back just first.
Yeah. So having landed in Lisbon for the flight, while you were still gallivanting across Portugal, I flew with Kelsey, who had joined us as we all arrived in the Algarve, by the way. Shout out Kelsey Bushk. We went straight from Portugal to Vegas on Friday, July 5th, for what was supposed to be, admittedly, in a very optimistic and eventually unrealistic scenario, the U.S.'s
hindsight.
Yeah, we know now. We know now how that turned out. But it was, in my mind, supposed to be the U.S.'s quarterfinal Copa match on Saturday the 6th. Sadly, Mike, as you allude to with hindsight, it was not that match.
Was that a spoiler alert? I'm sorry, I don't know.
Well, we all know already. The tournament was spoiled, not by us.
Yes. Yes.
All that said, it was a fairly good game. It was Brazil versus Uruguay. We got to hang out and watch the Euros with some FFTs ahead of the Copa game. More shout outs coming their way. Shout out to Mark and Leela, aka US soccer super fans, Eagle Man and Wonder Woman.
Whoop, whoop.
Also, shout out to Don and Danny that we hung out with that day. That game ended in a PK shootout, by the way, which happened at the goal we were sitting behind. And I don't know, my personal opinion, those are always fun to watch from that close-up angle. So
I feel like we've had a lot of those of late.
We've gotten lucky. Yeah. And especially in big tournaments, like deciding major outcomes. So, but yeah, anyway, after that, returning to the States, straight to Vegas, I finally returned home to Denver. And Mike, you made your way to the beautiful land. Speaking of picturesque places, New Jersey.
Yes. By that point, you were in the home stretch. I flew from the Azores to beautiful JFK Airport with the eventual goal to get to New Jersey, the beautiful birthplace of Taylor Ham, DJs, and the one and only Colin Patrick Martin.
Oh,
the man, so great. They had to give him 3 first names.
Never trust someone with more than one first name. That's what I've heard.
But 3 times, oh man. Anyway, I was touching back down stateside for the Copa America semifinal match at MetLife Stadium, host of the 2026 FIFA Men's World Cup final in a few years. But surprisingly, I was having an issue with my extra tickets not selling. You know, there was some guy named Messi playing, so I figured that wouldn't take long to sell. Flash cut to a montage of MLS match tickets selling for like 1,000% face value for any Inter Miami game. But for some reason, I couldn't get any bites. I have no idea why. So, given these moronic people that didn't want to see the GOAT play in the Garden State, I made the far-fetched suggestion that probably was already seated in your brain that maybe you should take one of my tickets. Knowing it was under 24 hours away for kickoff and across the country, in which you just flew over days earlier. It was a bit far-fetched, but like the lunatic that he is, folks, he said, hold my beer and hold that ticket. And he booked a flight to join me and some great friends and about 80,000 Argentinian fans for that match.
Lot of Argentinian fans.
Well, notice I didn't say Argentines because trust me, there were your Messi, La Albiceleste fans that did not hail from Argentina, which is fine, but just wanted to call that out, that there was a lot of Messi Argentina fans. But that's
everywhere we go.
You know, when you're the GOAT, you bring the fans.
Yeah. So it was.
But there it was. That was the perfect storybook ending of a wild whirlwind summer tour for the Footy Travelers, meeting up again in a fleet of
spontaneity, craziness. Yeah. Our crazy itinerary over the course of 2.5 weeks, I'd say, together doing 7 games. And actually, we didn't really even mention at the beginning the 3 pre-tournament friendlies we attended, by the way. You know, I'll just add that real quick there too. But 7 tournament games across 2 continents in 18 days. Wow.
And with 5 of those games heavily concentrated at the front end of it, again, 5 games in 5 days.
5 different cities.
You know, still 2 different continents.
Yeah. I mean, God,
I don't need to like get a resume up here, but
you don't want to sound too cocky or prideful. I get it. But you know that it's resume worthy. It's pretty impressive.
You know, some would call it impressive. Others, like my family, friends, and coworkers, might call it psychopathic. Especially your last minute, less than 24-hour Audible trip. But hey, that's Footy Travelers traveling, baby.
That is Footy Travelers. That's Footy traveling. That's what we do. So what were your personal highlights of this whole thing, this whole crazy itinerary? What would you say people have to know about?
So Yeah, this question I love, and I feel like I get it the most when telling people that we cumulatively went to 10 matches, um,
Yeah.
over, a significantly short duration. But the question's always like, okay, what's the match highlight? So I got to put one match highlight in here, and it's got to be arguably one of the most exciting group stage matches that happened this year in the Euro specifically, maybe even between the Euro and Copa.
Okay.
Italy versus Croatia, live in person in Leipzig, sitting around a bunch of Croatian fans in an Italian jersey. Definitely not anticipating the result of that match going the way it did. It was wild. Leipzig was beautiful and covered in Croatians, and they just made. I remember walking through the streets thinking to myself, this is why we came to the Euro, because it's so much easier for these European countries and their fans to travel, obviously, because it's in their own continent, and it's not like the World Cup where it's in these far-fetched places. And so they come in swarms.
Mhm.
And I think that was a very, very cool experience to just be around those Croatians.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they were not very happy after the match, though.
I mean, can't end well for everyone all the time.
Right. But I will say the counter argument to that, not argument, but I got to taste the glory of victory, or I guess what would be classified as a victory for some in the Swiss fans. When I was in Frankfurt, they were playing Germany in the group stages, and they drew that match. They should have won it, but they drew that match, and they classified that as a very big victory, and they got after it, like full blown, lots of drinking, wanted everyone a part of it. And so that was a highlight for me, because I was like probably no more than like 10 hours after I just landed off of a red eye and went and watched that match in a bar near the fan zone. And it just like it devolved into quite a late night.
Okay. Highlights, low light inside the bar, maybe late at night.
Right.
Yeah.
And needing low light, the next day, for sure.
Gotcha. Yeah. Some strained eyes.
What else? I mean, seeing our buddy, our OG Scott, and not only seeing him at another tournament, but having him host us and get some quality time with him definitely was a highlight for me. That marks our fifth major football tournament that we've seen him at.
I want to say so. Yeah. 4 World Cups and a Euro. Yeah.
Yeah. He's the only guy I've ever, aside from you.
Oh, I was like, whoa, wait, whoa. Where's this going?
Aside from you.
The jelly feels just creeping in right away.
The only dude that, or only person that I've been to all 6 continents, inhabitable continents, that I've like been in with.
You've been to Australia?
No, not Australia with him. Never mind.
Yeah. See,
that would have been a really fun. That would have really been a fun little prank on you. Like, actually, we just scooted over to Australia real quick just to check it off the list.
Absurd.
Sorry, didn't mean that. 5 continents.
So I still hold the title. That's what you're saying.
You do. You still have the belt.
I'm still your one and only.
Yes, always and forever.
The love is real here, folks. The love is real.
I do think a highlight that you and I had together, because obviously with Scott, but when we were in Dortmund, that was our first day reconnecting in Europe together of our trip.
Yep.
And I think we had a pretty fun time at the BVB Dortmund Stadium.
Yeah, Signal Iduna. Yeah.
That was, hanging around the yellow wall after the match and like just throwing Footy Traveler stickers on every part of that stadium. I mean, that was a pretty fun time.
I cannot wait until the FFT photos come in through some DMs or what have you with like, oh my gosh, I went to Dortmund and I found your sticker. I mean, they were
right.
It will be hard to find. So if you're up for a challenge, go find them. But they're in a lot of good spots. I can't wait actually to put out a little. I have a little Instagram reel idea. We'll be putting forward as the season for Bundesliga gets closer, but keep your eyes peeled. Yeah,
nice teaser.
But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that stadium, very much a club stadium, and that club very much, obviously has its own personality. real grungy and just like almost like punk rock. I
Punk rock,
loved it.
gritty.
It was dirty. It was gritty. Yeah. But
it was very much a classic stadium that really only inspired me more to just want to go visit for a Dortmund match.
right.
Honestly,
Do it proper.
yeah.
What else? Like what is any other highlights travel wise
I mean,
or other than footy or I don't know.
yeah. I mean, footy on vacation, you know, us taking a little break, but still watching some footy while in Portugal was, I mean,
Yeah.
we've been talking about it for a long time, and I'm glad we finally did it. And, you know, there's nothing like sitting seaside, having some drinks and watching football. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, that's pretty
It's
fantastic.
like the coming together of all the best things in the world.
Right. It's amazing.
Jeez.
So yeah, that was a big highlight. I will say, I mean, Germany was a whirlwind, and so I will say it was a tale of two types of trips. Like,
yeah,
Germany was quick and fast, and we just always had something going on each day. And Portugal was much chiller.
Yeah, and I mean, I would argue as it should have been, given the actual physical environment we were in Portugal,
Right.
down in the Algarve. So, yeah. Well, cool.
What about you? So
yeah.
that was that. I would say those are my. I mean, we can talk about people, and I'll probably interject more folks because there was a lot of really cool people that we met, which is one of the reasons that we love doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
But what about you?
Highlights?
What were your highlights?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. I'll break it down. I have some footy, centric highlights. I think I have some travel highlights, and then I've thought about it, and it really is a combination of footy and travel. Particular moment, particular evening that really stood out for me. But footy wise, sport wise, generally the highlight was just seeing the difference, the tangible difference between the vibe of the Euros and, the vibes of the Copa. There were all these, cliches about the differences between the two tournaments on the field, like across the internet,
right,
as we were traveling and the tournaments got started. And I thought they were accurate. The more I watched both,
there was like dance. What were there? Like there were some dance
romantic
metaphors
versus like knife fights. Like
right.
what flavor do you want? Pick your tournament. Yeah.
Right.
But the vibes and everything like off the field, outside for the fans, just the general overall environments, they were different, and I could feel that. And maybe that was the organization of them and the difference between the organizing bodies. Maybe everything just kind of seemed smoother. Well, I mean, not kind of, like everything did seem smoother at the Euros.
Yeah.
Each town, each stop we went to, and granted they were smaller cities and smaller towns, so maybe it's easier to do so, but like they fully embraced the event. They had places to gather, places to drink. That was also my first time in Germany, so maybe that's just Germany in general. But, I compare that to a place like, going back to Vegas, there's just so much else to do as well, like in addition to a soccer event that's happening, even though it is happening in that place. So it's hard to feel fully immersed in the footy, I think, in the States, like at the Copa, because again,
well,
all those things.
And I think, and tell me if you agree with this, but it's also, you have to think about Copa, like, didn't get promoted until like 2 months before the event kicked off. Whereas like Euros was getting promoted, like Scott was sending us pictures of them. Yeah. It's been hyped up for so long.
Yeah.
So obviously people are going to take note of it. But I think you're right too. Like, you are coming from smaller towns versus big cities that have a lot of other things going on in the States.
Right. Yeah. So I guess, kind of just to come full circle, I think the highlight when it came to the footy for me was being in an environment that fully understands what it's like to embrace that footy fan culture. And maybe even, maybe this is fair to say, a place that has been influential in defining the more romanticized version of footy fan culture. I mean, there's different types of fan cultures. I get it. But, it was, for me, highlight just being there and feeling like I belonged in a way. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this may be a section for later in the discussion, but I learned a lot about German football and fandom, like being around Germans, talking about what they care about and why they're different than a lot of other European countries.
Yeah.
Or any countries, really.
Yeah. Touche.
Okay, so you had a football category.
Right.
You had a travel category.
Yeah, highlight travel wise, not to borrow too much from you, but like the Algarve. Holy crap. It's got to be the time there. And maybe not just being in the Algarve, but for me specifically, it was being in and on the water. We went and did that boat day. That was fantastic. We had that afternoon.
It was a large boat.
It was, yeah, like 50 some plus feet, right? I think.
Yeah, we bouged it up a bit.
Yeah, we classed it up. We went in on it with some friends and whatnot, so that helped. But yeah, did the afternoon kayaking around the Benagil caves. That was a happy place for me, I would say. It was legitimately crowded, I have to admit, and typically that would be like too crowded for my liking, but I didn't care. Like being again on the water, just at the sea, in the ocean, I enjoyed it nonetheless.
When you say it, do you mean like the Benagil caves specifically, or like all of Portugal, like water that we were around?
Good, fair question. The Benagil caves and like the area on the water, like up on the coast, like right near them, it was just filled with boats and kayaks, and just like you could tell that it is a newer touristy place, and they have yet to like really regulate it. So, but yeah. That specific area.
Thailandy, which I liked.
Yeah, Thailandy.
Yeah,
for sure.
Which isn't a word, but it is
now.
It had those vibes.
No, it is now.
Yeah,
we've made it a word. In the Footy Traveler Dictionary of Words that you will not find in Webster's, look up Thailandy. And then last highlight. I think I'll say this will probably come as no surprise to you, having been there with me, but our call to do a beer garden specifically in Munich. During our last night in Germany for the round of 16 matches, and especially the Germany round of 16 match, to me, that was the perfect combo of everything I think we're about. We immersed ourselves in this little slice of local culture, but to be fair, we did it via soccer, via the football.
Right.
But again, to go back to the footy highlight, just the crowd there, the vibe, the physical setup itself was something I think all cities in the U.S., regardless of whether or not they're hosting a match, but all cities in the U.S. need to have something like a German beer garden for the World Cup 2026.
Which I think they do in some places. I just don't think it's like become a very standard thing. But there are some places that are like touting themselves as beer gardens, and they have the benches and big screens and stuff.
Sure. But they need to like, this is my personal opinion, they need to promote themselves and host watch parties for World Cup 2026. And every single day, especially during the group stage. Like, let's get into it, people. Anyway, they had a DJ there. There was German house music in between, halves and in between games. And,
we might have to put one of those songs, just spliced it in there, a little Johnny Depp.
We'll do that. Hey, you guys want to hear a German house song? The content we put up on Instagram of me dancing like an absolute maniac. If you missed that, you can still catch it on the account, on the profile at Footy Travelers. But yeah, that sums it up perfectly for me, those images. So I'd say we learned a few things along the way. We're always learning new things. One of the beauties of travel, I think. So I want to share some of our lessons learned, or some people, for some completely unexplainable reason, all of a sudden started calling them learnings, as if we already didn't have the word lessons. Where the hell did that come from, by the way?
Oh, wow. Okay. You okay, man?
Where
That's
did we
escalated.
get that word? Learnings.
I just, that feels like this struck a nerve.
Yeah, well, yeah. I'm fine. I'm fine. I
No, I mean,
I can tell you're
fine.
I just really hate that word. Learnings.
brought up our lessons learned, though. Maybe we should just get back to that. I mean, now I just want to find a way to drop in the word learnings in the conversation just to really set you
Yeah,
off.
don't do it.
But I mean, maybe it would help if we just called them like travel tips.
Yeah, touche. We have referred to them as such before. So, much better way to frame it. I have a few travel tips I think are worth sharing. I want to hear yours as well, but I want to explore a specific one around a question that one of our listeners and fellow footy travelers asked ahead of our trip.
Hey, this is Robbie from Denver, and I wish I was going to Germany. And what I'd like to know about Germany is, as you go from town to town, what the different beer cultures are, what's a good beer in one town, what do beers cost in the stadium, what they cost in town square, and just favorite towns and which beers were your favorite in each town.
Ooh, that's a great question, Robbie. I'll start here, and I will admit that I'm not typically a big beer drinker, but when in Rome, or Germania in this case, I did have plenty at the Euros. That said, Colin, why don't you take this one?
Okay.
And I'll come back with some tips and lessons, not learnings, that I learned this time around as well, since I'm just not the beer guy.
Yeah, I appreciate that emphasis, by the way. Yeah, sure. So I'd say Robbie's on point in his understanding that different regions of Germany specialize in certain brews of beer. Despite my greater propensity to opt for beer when I do drink, I won't claim to be an expert on German beer, but I think it is fair to say that the most popular or most widely popular beer in Germany is probably the Pilsner, but especially in the north, the west, and the east. So I've read, at least. And then you get into the south, Bavaria area, Munich, as we saw. I feel like it was all Helles Lager or Weiss beer or Dunkel. I think you had some Dunkel at the beer garden that last night. Yeah. So one of my personal favorites recently, at least, is a good Kolsch, which comes from the Cologne or Köln area. And then you have, an area you were in, Mike. If you're in a place like Leipzig, I'm curious to hear whether you noticed this while you were there or not. I know, again, it was a short time and you're not a huge beer drinker, but apparently Gölsch is a good beer, or Gölsch, to get in and around, that city of Leipzig. I think it originated in Goslar, which is only maybe 2 hours northwest of Leipzig. So, yeah, anyone heading to Germany, as Robbie alludes to, just ask which beers are local to that particular region you're in. I'd say try as many as you can. Mike, what did you notice? Can you speak to the second part of Robbie's question? What did you notice about beer in different places, or I should say the difference, if any, in prices between beers in a place like a stadium and then beers like in town?
Yeah. So the beers at the stadium were reasonably priced, like €7 for 500 milliliters. And outside the stadium, they were pretty much the same price. They really didn't vary that much. And I feel like I had seen a variety of different, establishments, right? If you're going to a super nice place that may be costing a little bit more, or if you're paying for a larger, volume or whatever. But I think ultimately they were not like crazy what we anticipate like American prices or American stadiums to do when they kind of jack the prices up. So that I think was really welcoming. You could go in and have a couple beers and a snack, and it was like pretty reasonably priced.
Yeah.
Ironically, as you were talking about Leipzig, actually, my first drink that I had when I was in that region, that part, Frankfurt and Leipzig, was a apple vine, or it's essentially like a cider.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's apple based. So for those that don't really care for your traditional beers, the Bavaria area does have sort of like different types of ciders and stuff that were pretty good, pretty strong.
Bavaria, like in the south?
Yeah. Oh wait, I said Bavaria, but I think it is in the south. Now I have to do my own research here.
Look up the cider. It's Germany. They got great cider.
Apple Vine,
okay,
I believe is what it was.
Yeah.
It looked like apple wine on the menu.
Gotcha.
And so I was like, that sounds fun.
Okay.
But then if you are going to drink beers, know that there are steins that are available typically at the beer gardens, which does just generally feel pretty fun to just be like lugging a huge stein around and like cheersing with your mates.
Mm-hmm.
But as you know, chemistry goes and you're outside and drinking a cold beer out of like, I don't even know how many liters those things are.
Should be
they get warm.
A stein would be a single liter, right?
I think so. I mean, I think some of the crazy beer gardens will do like super big ones too, but I don't know. I can't drink beer that fast, so they get warm. And if you don't like warm beer, maybe do the Portuguese style, which is like get a bunch of just small glasses and just keep drinking beers and get up and get them that way.
Gotcha,
so
chemistry, thermodynamics coming together to warm your beer up pretty quickly in a stein. Just beware.
Well,
buyer beware.
Right.
But
as we noticed,
buyer maybe be delighted. I think maybe, I don't know if we talked about this price point specifically yet. I remember the steins at the Munich beer garden, to give, this comparison to American stadiums, as you mentioned, Mike. The steins there were like 10.50 euros.
Right.
And again, those are like a liter, a lot of beer. You get like, I don't know, a half liter, maybe a third liter beer at an American stadium. And it's like, what, $15 minimum, maybe? So
minimum, yeah.
Price point comparison. There you go. But
and they're a bit heavier on the alcohol content typically as well.
Ones?
So German beers.
Okay, fair. Yeah.
At least Dunkels are. I know that.
Mike can attest. Well, Robbie, hopefully that's what you were looking for as far as information around that question. For any listener, never hesitate to reach out, by the way, and ask us a question. We'd be happy to feature it here on the podcast. You can either email us at footytravelers@gmail.com, 1 L in travelers, by the way, or just DM us on Instagram or X, formerly known as Twitter. Our handle is at footytravelers, also still 1 L. But Mike, what about your other takeaways, tips and lessons, beyond the beer question? I have mine I'll get to, but yeah.
I think we've talked about this before, but fan zones are a very popular place for people to go watch matches, whether they are the host country or other. We experienced this when we were in Germany. There were very popular for places for people to watch, especially I think just the locals like to go there because it is a bit of a more of the spectacle. So if you don't have a match ticket, people will want to go there and watch. So my recommendation there is to get there early if you want to. I experienced not being able to get into one. That was one thing that I thought was really great about Germany. They weren't allowing just people to just roll in and create, an overcrowded situation. They were stopping people from entering once it reached capacity.
You mean they just didn't let people rush in and then realize they were over capacity?
Isn't that crazy how they do that? It's like they were thinking about people and their safety.
Wow. Yeah.
Weird.
Sorry, I interrupted.
Crazy.
Yeah, go.
Crazy. Yeah. And then I would say there is still a community of cash, exchange. Businesses are still taking cash, and a lot of times they are not taking card.
Like a cash economy.
Noticed it. Yeah, I mean, it was not like heavily. I mean, you could pretty much get anything with a card, but there were some instances on my first few days where if you're going through plazas or you're going through areas that are maybe a little bit more busy because of the event, that they don't want to take card or they do not accept card. And so I kind of got stuck and had to go to the ATM pretty quickly, which I was surprised by, given that, most people assume Europe is very much card friendly.
Yeah, as did I. And I'm glad you actually mentioned it to me before I arrived in Europe. I did take out some cash and exchanged it. I have a quick little, like, almost horror story. And I was so lucky I was with Kelsey and we had 2 debit cards. And I'm alluding to the end already, but like, if I may.
Yeah, go.
So
do it.
Definitely have cash and get it early. Like, don't get it at the end of your trip when you're in a rush to get to the airport, because the context is that we had parked overnight with our rental car in a parking garage. We woke up the next morning to take the car to the airport and return it. And, the people at the hotel told us, oh, you'll be fine paying with a card. And the machine at the parking garage was set up to take cards. But of course, on that particular morning, it wasn't working. So we needed cash.
Of course.
I had cash, but I had a 50 and it only took 10s and 20s. So I'm like, all right, I needed to go then to the ATM across the way. And what happened? I think maybe to start off with, I didn't have enough. So I needed to go to the ATM. And I went to the ATM and I didn't specify what bills I wanted. And so it gave me a 50 because I asked for 50 to cover like a $20, €25, parking ticket. And I'm like, oh shit. Well, let me do another transaction to get and ask for like 10s and 20s this time. Well, because I had done back-to-back inserts of my bank card, my bank froze flagged it. So I couldn't get different bills. So I had to run back into the parking garage, go ask Kelsey for her ATM card, and this time actually ask for 10s and 20s. We paid it and we went. But again, just to come back to the idea of bring cash, have it ready, have small bills, and just have it early in your trip so that you can go throughout your whole trip without any stress of trying to get cash late.
It still matters. People still accept cash. That's
there you go.
That is important.
Other lessons learned, or travel tips.
I would say, in Germany specifically, I think we both experienced the highs and lows of train travel.
Mm-hmm.
An itinerary such as ours would probably have been impossible in many other countries, given that we were going to many different cities very quickly and had pretty tight timetables, if we're going to be honest. And we were able to do it with the German train system, the Deutsche Bahn.
Yeah.
And the Deutsche Bahn, yep. And the irony is that I found them to be pretty consistent. Some were a little late here and there, but the quality of the trains were really good, and the numbering and the car numbers, and like did announcements and the boards, everything about the train travel. And I did a lot of train travel, as did you. Was pretty freaking smooth by comparison to, say, at least in my experience in the United States on Amtrak train travel.
Yeah.
Now, Germans have a much higher standard, and talking to Germans, they could barely even give any positive note about the train travel. They're like, they're always late.
Yeah.
There's always things stuck on the tracks. And I'm like, I mean, yes, I had I was stuck on a track for like maybe 30 minutes, but like, I don't know. I didn't find it to be so awful to the standard that the Germans were sort of implying.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you felt the same.
I did. I thought the trains were fine. I thought they were pretty excellent. I think I can empathize that the number of minutes, the amount of time that they were late in some instances was ridiculous. And I actually have a story about this, if I may, in a quick second. But yeah, from all intents and purposes, the train travel was fine. And it was great. And it was efficient and generally on time. Sure, that was like 2 to 5 minutes late sometimes, but it's 2 to 5 minutes. That said,
yep.
I'm just going to interject with one travel tip, piece of advice. I'd say the headline is advocate for yourself. There's going to be times when you're traveling where you need to step up and tell someone like what you either want or need, because you're not going to be offered it otherwise. So speaking of trains, I landed in Frankfurt. And my plan was to just, at the airport, hop on that train to Dortmund to meet you. And the thing was, you had to book a specific train and a specific departure time, which we did ahead of time. And I chose a departure time that was like 2 hours after my arrival. I wanted to give myself some cushion to get through customs and all that stuff. And I didn't check a bag, which, I usually don't anyway, but I wound up like having 2 hours, right? I was ready to go 2 hours before my train was scheduled to leave. And at that,
because you touched down like earlier than your anticipated time as
that
well,
I think
right?
that was
Like,
also part of it. Yeah. Like I may have landed a whole half hour early or something, so
yeah.
had a lot of time. And at that point, the train that was running the same route I was going to do in 2 hours, a train I could have selected when I booked my ticket, but I didn't, again because of the cushion. That had yet to leave. So I'm like, oh, well, why don't I just hop on this train? Like I actually did make that time. I could get on this train. So I asked, can I get on this train? I've paid for a ticket. Here's the proof. And they're like, no, 9, you have to get on the train you booked. You couldn't possibly get on another train. I was like, all right. But actually, I shouldn't maybe describe it that way because the first guy was a little more kind and pleasant. He did say that if my train was delayed by a certain amount of time, then it would be okay for me to jump on another train.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It was at that point on time. So I'm like, all right, well, maybe I'll just go ask somebody else. So I went down to the platform and the earlier train showed up. And I went to like get on the car I was supposed to be on with my ticket for the later train.
Mm-hmm.
And then this woman came off like working the train and she was checking tickets. So I asked her again. And she said, no, you have to get on the other train. And that train takes off. It goes away. So after it takes off, like moments later on the board, you can see that my train is now delayed by like over 30 minutes, maybe close to 50 minutes. So I should have been able to get on that train. But like the issue was I asked. I didn't just like take it upon myself. And eventually I wound up just getting on the next train coming through anyway, taking it to Dusseldorf, switching trains there and going to Dortmund. Met a really cool fellow traveler that we talked and connected, and we both decided to do the same thing. He was also heading to Dortmund from the airport. So just advocate for yourself. I had to do it actually another time, not advocate for myself, but like overcome a little travel hiccup with transportation in Houston, between Houston and Dallas. But maybe I'll defer to you real quick before I jump into that story.
No, I mean, I think you're spot on. There were several instances in my trip that I had to do that for various reasons, whether it's, wanting to just maybe not take no for an initial answer and finding potentially an alternative.
Which is what we did at the beer garden. No, that was the one point where I wanted to come back and say like, yeah, they told us no, we didn't have a reservation. And then I was like, well, let's go ask again. Let's just ask a slightly different question. Say, hey, I don't forget what I said, but is it possible that we can come in now? And then if someone or if someone cancels, can we, that's what the question was. Is it possible that someone doesn't show up and then we can take the reservation? And then the guy was like, all right, well, these guys really want to come in. They're being, polite about it. They're just asking. And he actually offered an alternative, which was if you go stand up on the balcony and don't stand it and take up space at a table, you're welcome to just come in and watch. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, I think it's a good lesson for everyone just in terms of whether it be traveling or not. But I think oftentimes traveling, we can be a bit skittish in the idea that like, okay, you get told no, I don't want to be a disruptor. I don't want to cause a scene. I don't want to, break rules because I don't, fortunately it's Europe. You don't anticipate punishment to be, extremely harsh. Whereas, maybe don't take this advice in certain countries that this could be a bit more disruptive. But yeah, advocate for yourself. Try an alternative method of, finding a way to make a situation work in your favor. Not taking advantage.
Right. Yeah.
And I forgot what I was going to say.
Okay. Well, let me jump in then with my second little transportation hiccup story. You may have seen it on Instagram as well, but we had pre-booked a bus between Dallas between Houston and Dallas. And we were leaving the morning, and I say we, this is me and Don Armando. Shout out, Don. We're leaving Houston the morning of the game in Dallas. So like we need to leave the morning and get there, get to our hotel and like quick flip it, go right to the stadium kind of thing. Flixbus, death to Flixbus. You're dead to me. They cancel our bus 45 minutes before departure time. And so we're kind of screwed. But, you know, some quick thinking, you know, Don and I talk. This also maybe is a lesson in like conserving and saving up on some miles, airline miles, some travel points here and there. Because what we did was just like, all right, I looked at flights right away between Houston and Dallas, and I could book us 2 flights on United points. And so we booked the flights through points. We made sure that we could actually get to the airport in time to get there. And, you know, I would hate to book a flight and then miss it because like we were in such a rush. But we booked the flight and then we booked the Uber and then we went to the airport and we just flew to Dallas. And we actually, I think we landed around the same time we would have bus arrived. So, yeah, it was just, you know, it took some quick thinking on your feet but having those resources of the miles and not taking the hit sort of to your wallet financially was helpful. So maybe the other, beyond advocating for yourself in certain instances, not taking no for an answer, be ready with, you know, some backup plans or backup resources when it comes to transportation and travel.
Yep.
So,
one lesson that I kind of learned myself, and I sort of alluded to it before, but is and it is kind of advocating for yourself, but it's also just like being open to new opportunities or as they present themselves. So for instance, while I was on one of my trains, I was sitting at like a 4-seater, like at a table, and there was no one sitting in the 3 other seats. My seat I was in, obviously, and 3 guys came on, all wearing their German Bundesliga club kits. And they seemed like to have a really good time, and they're, you know, just chatting German, having fun, playing cards. And I was a bit intimidated by them at first because I just was like, all right, I don't want to disrupt their day. They're clearly like having fun playing cards, and I didn't want to, you know, engage. And then, you know, after probably 45 minutes to an hour of a 3-hour train ride, I was like, let me just talk to them. And I think there is a maybe a bit of a stereotype that German people can be a bit cold.
Cold, unapproachable,
right? And it was just so, I mean, and this is the instance with a lot of people that I'd met in Germany, but like these 3 specifically were really, really welcoming guys. I had their names written down. I apologize for forgetting them now, but I do remember how just like welcoming they were. They're like, do you want to play cards? Do you want us to teach you? You know, I was asking about their club that they support. They're big Schachel fans. And it was just like a very cool, genuine moment. I got to learn a lot about like your traditional, you know, impressions of the German train system, the internet system. They are always complaining about how there's no internet in Germany. That's welcome to Germany. That was their whole claim. Learning about the history of their club, where they traveled to, what they thought about the Euros being hosted there. It just was one of those instances that you love to have, and kind of that fleeting moment of like, all right, I got a couple hours sitting next to some locals. I'm going to chat them up and see if you can learn some things, vice versa. And yeah, it was a great opportunity. So I feel like maybe the lesson is just like step out of your comfort zone even a little bit more, even though you're already in, you know, a place that you've never been before, but, you know, engage with people, especially if maybe your initial impression is maybe they're a little bit unwelcoming.
Yeah. I have a kind of a random tip, travel tip.
Yeah. Go for it.
Not to non sequitur this, but, you know, on the credit card machines, obviously, I think we're operating in a system where most credit cards just offer, you know, they don't charge conversion fees. So it makes sense to just select the local currency to be charged onto your card on that machine. But then,
because typically, just for people, just for visual sake, typically when you put your card in and it's from it's based in a country that has a different currency, it will then prompt to say, do you want to select which currency you want this charge to be based from?
Yeah.
Whether it be in dollars if you're in the United States, or euros if you're in Europe.
And we were in Europe, so it was like, do you want euros or dollars? Because I recognized that they were American credit cards. But you select the local currency, just always, because your bank's going to convert it. And hopefully you have a good credit card where they're not charging you that conversion fee, or you have a travel rewards card or something like that. But there was this weird little sneaky second attempt or second question where it asked you if you wanted to then accept the machine's conversion rate. It was going to like convert it for you somehow. And then also, but like just reject.
Oh, I never saw that.
We finally saw it in Portugal in one spot. And some friends of ours had told us about this, but they always said, just reject the conversion rate. And on the screen, it looks like you're canceling the transaction, but you're not. You're just saying no to the on machine conversion rate. But just know that if you ever travel to Europe and you get confused on a handheld credit card machine and it asks you to accept the machine's conversion rate, it is okay to reject it. It will not cancel your transaction, and your bank will just convert as it normally does without charging you a fee for that. So,
right,
little travel tip there.
That is a good one.
Actually, another quick random one. I know we're coming up on time, but I don't know what your experience was like leaving Portugal, but having entered the EU through Germany. I didn't go through the passport control line for US passports because I had entered the EU in one country and was leaving through another. So I guess my tip here is just like, if you're doing that, if you are entering the EU through one country and leaving through another, there will be a line for US passports, but there's also this other line for all other passports. And that was actually the line I was meant to go through. Like I was told to go through that line. So just ask, if that's your scenario, just ask which line you should go through. Save time. Don't get in the wrong line and then get all the way to the end and then be told you should have gone in the other line and then waste time. And then maybe you miss a flight or something, but that's my tip.
I wonder if that was occurring with people that were in the Azores with me. The Azores airport is quite small.
Okay.
And so there was not as clearly a defined lanes, or at least I didn't remember that being the case, because that was where I was leaving the EU technically from. But I did overhear some people saying that they got into the wrong line and they got essentially stuck for a while. And I don't really know why that was for them, but I think that's a fair tip in terms of just making sure that you are setting yourself up for success and not delays, given which passport you hold.
There you go.
I think that's I mean, one that I always tell people is mobile entry, or not mobile entry.
Global entry.
Well, there's global entry.
I love that. But love global entry for the win. What are you speaking about?
Hold.
Please hold.
I'm speaking about when you get back to the States as an American, as a U.S. passport holder, the CBP process. So your mobile passport control program. So when you enter into the United States, there's an app that you can indicate which port of entry you are returning to, and you can take your photo with your camera on your phone, and that completes your entry. So you don't have to fill out anything, and you get an express lane when you enter into the United States. So you just go right to your passport control officer, and then you show them your QR code and they scan it, and that's all the information. They say, hey, welcome back. See you later.
So before you arrive in the States, while you have connectivity, you do this. And then once
you do it when you land, because you need to know what gate you're arriving in, and they only give you, I think, a 3-hour window of how long it expires if you do it too early.
Okay.
So every time I touch down coming back from abroad, I open up the app, I figure out what gate I'm at, and I take the headshot of just like what they would take the photo of you when you go through passport control. And then all entry points will have something that is called either mobile passport or express mobile passport control or something like that.
Okay. Do you have global entry, by the way?
I don't.
Okay. So you either have that or you have this alternative system. Wow. That's pretty great.
Yeah.
Cool. Efficient, it seems.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've saved like legit hours not waiting in line behind all these other people that are like having to get their forms filled out and read by the passport control officer.
We've talked a lot about our travel experiences positively for the Euros. We kind of snubbed a little bit of the Copa. I have one final lesson learned, I'll call it. I don't know if it's a tip. Maybe it's a tip. But it's related to Copa, and then future forward, future looking into the future for World Cup 2026. But I thought it was super easy to get to MetLife Stadium on the train. Like previous to going to that Copa semifinal, I kind of thought you had to drive. Like there was no really good way to get there other than driving or taking an Uber. But the train, like as long as you know the route, sure, do some research ahead of time. You have to switch trains a couple times. There's so many train options in that Northeast corridor anyway.
Right.
But it drops you off right at the stadium.
Yeah.
So
it does fill up at the end of matches, but to get there on the way to matches, it is super convenient. I don't think they do a great job of promoting how easy it is, but even like my friends that are locals that live in like East Rutherford or West Rutherford, they're like, no, I always drive or I take an Uber because like getting there by train's not easy.
Yeah.
And I just was like, that didn't seem to be the case.
Yeah. I'm super biased towards trains. For all the obvious advantages of
big train guy.
Yeah. But anyway, I don't know. It's my tip. It's my point of view. We've really enjoyed recapping this whole travel experience, this whole summer Intercontinental tour. If you've enjoyed this episode, remind you to rate and review it, share an episode or two with a friend who might not be already a listener of the Footy Travelers podcast. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on X, follow us on YouTube. And get yourself a supporter scarf in the fan shop.
Yeah.
There's a link in the show notes to that. And I would say if I'm asking you as an audience member, as a listener, as a fellow footy traveler, if you can only do one thing, do it always, do it forever.
Be loud, be proud, and be good to each other. That's technically 3 things, but that's fine.